Okay, let's see if that's working. Give me a sec just to make sure everything's going. Okay. All right, we should be good again. All right, you guys are here. Feel free to comment in the chat. Let's see who's here. Yep, all right, good. We have people here. Give people a chance to come back in. I'll share out a new link real quick. All right. As people are filing their ways back in. Awesome. Let's see if there's anything in the comments to read. Do you think it was a blessing in disguise that Thomas and Friends got canceled? In a way, it's not canceled, but I do think it is a blessing in disguise. Um, I have some thoughts on All Engines Go that I really don't want to delve into, but I think All Engines Go, in a weird way, was the right thing for the show. If you looked at the show's last few years, they just kind of didn't really have an identity because they were trying to appeal to older fans still, but they were also trying to appeal to younger fans, and they just really couldn't figure out, who to lean on, who to not lean on, and it was a mess. So at the end of the day, it just made more sense just to start all over. And if they're going to go in that direction, stick to it. At least they're being honest with what they are and what they're trying to be. So if they're going to do that, then at least they're honest about it. So I guess it is a blessing. All right, as we let people file back in a few minutes, I want to do a little viewing of one of my previous episodes. It was The Greatness Within, episode I made back in 2020 for season 3. And it's what I consider to be my best episode of the series. I'll just say this. Anybody asking questions about All Engines Go, none of that's going to be canon to my series. None of those characters are appearing. No, nothing's going to happen. So in that regard, but yes. All right. I think we're good to go. Let's see. Is there a way I can share my screen here? It's the one thing. So bad with technologies. I think I'm going to stop my camera just for a sec. Give you guys something else to listen to while I talk. Thought I had everything all set up. Yep, here we go. Here's share screen. All right. Just one sec. Can you guys see my screen? If you guys, once I get confirmation on that, then we'll just start, and I'm just going to talk through the episode. I'll pause at different points and just give my thoughts on certain things that happen within it. But once I get confirmation you guys can see it, then that'll be great. Just waiting on. All right. Yep. Some people saying yes. Just need to hear a couple more. Yep. That's going great. Awesome. Let's get into it. So, I'm not sure if the audio is going to be heard or not. Just let me know if you can hear it once I start playing it. My end, but that's for other reasons. Quick sec. So you guys should be able to see it.
5 minutes early. Not bad for
But yeah, so
one of my best runs yet.
Here is The Greatness Within. I'm just going to kind of talk it through. So I'm going to start from the beginning, just to kind of talk a little bit about it first, why it's my favorite episode. And I'll just give my honest opinions on aspects of it in between. All right, so you guys can hear the audio. I can't hear it, but that's because of what my speaker mic headphone setup is right now. But that's fine. I pretty much know it line for line. So this episode was technically the first episode I conceived for this series, and it was bounced off of an original project from years ago. But it was something that I did with some other people that never came into fruition. But that project this episode idea got me thinking, and the scene that got me thinking was the climactic scene of, Gordon dejectedly taking the local train and then passing Henry with the super rescue convoy, and that whole moment was the moment that I was building up to. And when I first came up with the story, I was like, okay, I can't just start this story. Like, can't start the series with the story. Like, to have it have the impact I wanted to have, I wanted to build up to it. So I started thinking back, okay, how can I develop Gordon's arc? But then it's like, okay, how can I make it so that Henry feels triumphant to this moment? And then I started thinking about other characters and other ideas. And I realized the best place to start was to start in the 50s. And lo and behold, that led to the birth of my series. So let's take a look at the greatness within. Just gonna full screen it. So yeah, this was essentially the climactic episode of the series itself, but also just of, it was the springboard for what would become Civil New Era. Obviously, that's
the other Diesel was
pretty
here
cool.
to take on the train.
So this early
His
conversation
name is
between Dart and Gordon.
Milton.
Something I was doing in my series to this point was in season 1 at Barrow. Initially, you saw a good mix of steam and diesel, and then through season 1 into season 2 to now, you see more diesel engines coming to Civil, and now that the climax of that is met in this episode, and then obviously we have the Deltic here that comes in to talk to Gordon. And I wanted, it's not technically a Deltic, but I was like, okay, this model's close enough. I wasn't going to go heavily into detail, but it's supposed to be a Deltic. And the reason why I went with that is those were the kind of that was the class of engine that would replace, Gordon's family, and I figured that was most prudent to do that.
Excuse me, did I stutter?
I figured it'd be more personal to the situation.
Replace engines like me. Work Rusley, I'll have you know.
So that's why these two are. Yeah, okay. Oh, so you guys are saying turn the volume down on the video? Yeah, I can do that real quick. My bad. I have to remind myself that I'm not hearing it as well as you guys are.
Isn't worth a quart of oil over here.
There you go. Might be a little bit better. Hopefully you guys can hear me better.
Diesel. This pathetic Diesel and the rest of his class have single-handedly taken over your clacked out.
That's good. I'll just keep talking. But yeah, this whole conversation scene, I wanted it to feel like a slice of life originally as Gordon enters, but then things are slowly wrong. It's a different engine. They're late, and then all of a sudden these seeds of doubt are planted in Gordon. And now he's got to think about it. And Gordon's trying to be confident here. Throughout my series, Gordon's gone through a lot. He travels to London and then realizes London's not necessarily as forgiving to engines like him. And he deals with, the idea that his family's no longer really there. And I don't really give explanation for where they are, but it's implied that they've been kind of replaced and pushed to other places. Not necessarily scrapped yet, but just not in places they'd like to be. But yeah, obviously the typical intro of the series. Nothing really special about that, but here Gordon, this is where the seeds of doubt are finally planted, and this is where Gordon's going to hit the lowest moment of his life, as he's slowly realizing, diesels are coming in, his brothers and sisters are apparently all gone except for one, and at first he doesn't want to believe it because he hears it from a diesel, and that's where we let that conversation with the Fat Controller happen, which comes up very soon. But, Gordon has the strongest familial values in this series to anyone else. He's the only one who constantly brings up his siblings, brings up his family. The others do have siblings, presumably. They just don't really reference them.
After that
As you see in this opening scene, it's just typical Timoth banter.
That's the last time I take water from the other railway. It's disgusting. There's water over there.
James Gordon, James Henry and Duck are just talking about nonsense and doesn't really matter. And it really just, their lives are just not concerned with it. It's hard for them to sympathize with Gordon because they just don't think about it. The same way that
They don't sleep well, Henry?
the others would. As Gordon would. Gordon just cares so much about these things.
Why not? I'll tell you why. He's been hogging all the coal lately.
Right. Gordon does. I wouldn't. He is a. This episode is him being a depressed mess, and this is Gordon for years not really being able to handle his emotions. He's not really. He's an emotional person that doesn't try to act that way. So inside his head, all these negative thoughts flow, but in reality, he just doesn't, express them, and it's not healthy. And that this episode is kind of the idea that Gordon needs to finally express how he's feeling and get it out. No pun intended, of course. But here you have that classic interaction that sets up Henry's kind of plot later on, but the other characters are just talking. So obviously this is now the massive reveal. Looking back at Tidmouth here, knowing how I've improved the design and whatnot, it really speaks to it. Here, Gordon just seeing Boko and Daisy surrounding him at the station just kind of isn't helping his mood at all. But now we finally get the epic conversation between him and the Fat Controller, and this is like a father, the Fat Controller in this case, kind of explaining to his son. His son is finally at that age now where he's finally able to learn about life, and he really has that conversation about death and mortality, and it really affects Gordon. And it's not an easy conversation for the Fat Controller to have, but I always imagined he had this idea that at some point in time he'd have to have it. So here we are.
It's true.
Fat Controller and Gordon having this conversation, revealing what actually happened. It's sad.
Except one.
Just want to do a check. Is my audio okay? Because I can't hear the episode myself because of my setup. But are you guys? Am I being overpowered by the episode? Is it a good balance right now? Just let me know in the chat.
Only we could. Yes, I'll ask his whole
But yeah. And obviously Daisy is listening to this conversation she overhears, and alright, good, everything's good. So we get this. Now this brings Thomas in the story. And Thomas doesn't have a huge role, but he says he has a very nice scene with Gordon. This is something I wanted to do. One of my favorite aspects of the Railway series and the TV series was this idea of Thomas and Gordon having this alliance. We never really see it at play ever. It never really comes into mind. And it always kind of bothered me. So now we get to have that. I finally get to see them have that alliance come to key. And this is actually set up in an episode from season 2. Thomas, Emily, and the coaches, where Thomas kind of goes through something similar, but in a different sense.
I'll see you later.
Thank you, Mr. MPS, for the comment. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for all the wishes and whatnot.
Tank engines.
All right, so... And now we get this great conversation between Thomas and Gordon, where Thomas kind of sympathizes with Gordon, and it shows maturity, where Gordon still believes Thomas is this young little engine that doesn't really understand anything, and Thomas has really grown up a lot, both within this series and within the show itself. And this is where Thomas and Gordon are almost on similar playing levels, but Gordon just refuses to believe it. And these are the kind of underlying themes that were growing throughout the series to the point where Gordon
seen so much more of life, good and the bad. But there's
to the point where now Gordon and Thomas can have a conversation like this on the same level, but Gordon is just not mentally ready to share his emotions. And because Thomas still has those dashes of immaturity in there, that's why he gets short with Gordon by the end of the scene, and why Gordon doesn't respond well to it.
But you aren't doing that.
And I noticeably leave Edward out of this episode. And one of the things I always liked about Enterprising Engines is it's not one of those books where Edward comes in and everything's okay and he solves the problem. Edward's not involved at all in that book whatsoever. I don't even think he appears, and it's because he's on his branch line. And the island is basically going through this, crisis. It's the height of the dieselization plot. It's the height of modernization. Gordon's dealing with his family's being lost. Super rescue. These diesels are showing up. It's all these bad things happening at once. And Edward's not around to solve the problems, but it shows where the characters have grown to the point where they're able to handle it themselves without things getting out of control. Now, it takes a while, obviously, with the spins that I do in my own series, but having these conversations and characters being able to talk to Gordon on this level, it really helps them understand something. But yeah,
I let the loss of my class get to me.
it's
Worried about my mortality.
it's one of my favorite scenes in my series. Just them having this mature conversation with one another.
Express engine has realized not even the legacy and prestige of being aggressively can save him.
It's interesting you mentioned Down the Mine. I implied Down the Mine happens as I reference it at the beginning of one of my episodes back in season 1, and I really wish I had hit some of those connections more clearly and set that up stronger, and that's why I want to go back to my original season 1 when I finish the series as a whole and remaster it, hopefully. And that's where some of those ideas and themes would be drawn up more, so that moments like this would feel stronger, understanding, like, why Thomas and Gordon, this conversation has so much weight to it.
That pain hurts, Gordon, but you can't let it get
anyway.
You
so that's why these two are just going back and forth having this conversation. Gordon's obviously not mentally ready to have it. So,
bother. You try, Thomas.
It's
a good job, but not good enough.
Yeah, I agree. It's one of those things that gets set up. There's a couple of little those things that get set up sometimes in books or even in the show that just get dropped very quickly, and I never really understood why. Okay, so this is an interesting scene here, and this was a motif throughout the episode that I showed, that Gordon's emotions is tied to his performance with the Express. Here in this scene, he's obviously not feeling great. He's weighed down, so he's not going as fast. He's not trying his hardest, and that's why he ends up late, and that's why he ends up obviously getting chewed out by this diesel.
Get up the steam, Gordon.
And his driver, is trying to tell him, like, listen, you're perfectly fine. You should be able to handle this. And Gordon's just, he can't.
Let's get you home.
So, right here, now, Gordon's still dealing with it. So now we set up the big reveal. Scotsman's coming, obviously, but,
James will take your express this evening.
It's a nice little sequence of events that happens here.
Worse and worse. That's it for me.
Come up next. But more to the point about, like, that motif with Gordon Express, we see it multiple times where we have that scene where Gordon's just trying to get to Barrow, trying to show up this diesel finally, and he never really gets to show up that particular diesel. He never gets that moment. But that's not important. That's not the whole point of this episode. This is an episode about Gordon growing a lot as a person within and understanding what his true greatness is. And what his purpose is, that he's not just supposed to be just aggressively, he's not this big famous engine that's impervious to danger, that he's very mortal, and that his strength is being an express engine. So now we have this scene at Timoth Station where the visitor arrives. Interestingly, just do a POV shot. I was kind of inspired by the shot from I believe it's 5 New Engines in the Shed, where it's like a POV shot at the beginning where an engine's passing through the station. We never really figure out who, and it doesn't matter. It's kind of like that idea. So this is James just kind of being starstruck and caught in the moment. That's a little quiet thing I do in my series, that James does get starstruck by more famous engines. As you guys watched my most recent episode, The Flying Sudrian, James was quite enthused seeing Spencer for... it only happens, I think, briefly for one scene, but, like, it's just that kind of idea of, celebrity life. That's what James clings to. That's why he sticks to Gordon so much in the Rally series. So here we go, Scotsman and Gordon on screen together for the first time.
It has too long.
And they finally get to interact.
I'd like to hear about it.
Have that, initial conversation about these two being together for the first time ever. It's fun. These two are just talking now. Some little quiet banter and whatnot. Just to kind of ease us in to really get to know who Scotsman is. And I took a lot of the ideas of how I wrote Scotsman from The Great Race. I really like the way that Audrey Ducks line there's
You
funny.
two will be
The
on
way
display
Audrey,
in the main yard guard of
sets
the
up Scotsman as
station.
this very like
Photographers
proud
are
and
coming, so best behavior,
established
Gordon.
character,
Yeah,
but
yes,
the
sir.
way that the Great Race handles him is like he's a brother that likes to poke and prod, and Scotsman here is a little both. He
You've
pokes and
changed a
prods
lot.
at Gordon because
I
he's
had a
trying to get him out of
report
this
of
funk,
crew. They
but
didn't
he's
do a
not doing it
proper dome
excessively to the
tester
point where
job, of
Gordon's getting
course.
angry
But
and
it
jealous. That's not
serves.
that kind of.
I
This is
had
not
you
that kind
here
of
too,
time right now.
Reboot. Idiots.
If
And
you
I
guys
know
pay
this
attention to the
town makes you
background, the
special.
Reverend is right there next to that
It made
lady.
them give me back my proper
So
shape.
just
Is
thought it'd
that
be cool
why
to
you have
reference
two
that. You have
attendants being
Scotsman and Gordon
special?
having this whole conversation in front of cameras and press, and
No,
people
you
aren't really
hardly
paying
believe
attention
it,
to it.
Gordon. But over there they've
Just kind of an
hired a
interesting idea I did
immortal.
there.
But
Kind of leans
surely
into
they
some of the
can
ideas of like,
profit with.
are the engines real? Do
Exactly.
the engines
You're
have
a very
faces? Because
lucky
in reality,
girlfriend
people would
to have a
see these
controller who
engines
knows
in
how
the
to
yard
run
posted
my
together. They'd
way.
just be
What's it
taking
like
pictures. But
now
you're like,
with
if you
everyone
believe in the idea of the faces, it's like, well, are the engines talking
Nowadays,
to
I'm
each other? What
used
would they
for
be talking about?
classics
Which is
get
why
into
no one really can
it.
hear the conversation
The
here.
real
Doesn't mean
world
that
has
people
done
can't hear engines,
do you?
period. Obviously, the Fat
Surely
Controller
none of
can
your work
communicate with them.
ends somewhere.
But in this
It
moment in
does,
time,
but
it's not
your
anything
work
anyone's
is
focused in
far
on.
more important. People depend on you to be on time, and you do
But
it
yeah,
so
I just thought it
well.
was a fun
Can't
detail. I did this a lot in
fault
season
them.
3 where I would slip the Reverend in the
There it
background. I do it a little bit in season 4.
What matters
Just
is
the
that
idea of like, how was he able to
Russell
write these stories? How did he know what happened?
we
Oh, because
meant
he
to
was
get a
there. He's right
pride on
here
the line.
in this
We were meant
illustration
to
of Gordon and
rise
Scotsman
to
together
be the
talking in the
superior
yard.
engine. Well, Gordon, we still can be.
These
What
guys are just
made us
posing for the
great?
cameras,
God, you're still here, aren't you?
just
What has
talking a little bit.
changed
And
since
Scotsman
so
is kind of
much,
trying to dig at
Scotsman?
Gordon a little bit, but he doesn't want to
All
go
I
too deep because this isn't
understand.
really the
Oh,
time.
look, into the camera.
So that's why they just
Let's
kind of,
smile for
they
the
start to
end.
have that
Give the
conversation
people
that they
a
should have, but Scotsman kind of pulls back
All
after a
right,
while.
Scotsman. Do we say
And this is where we get more of
vain
that
booth
poking
of
and
you
prodding
and
Scotsman.
keep it that
This is
way?
where he's more interested in trying to like make fun of Gordon.
Leave it to my
Gordon's in a
to
lighter mood, so it's
interpret.
easier to do
I
it. This is where
wasn't
he kind of
internalizing
makes fun of
Henry
him.
I
There's
was
Henry in the
showing
background
life.
actually.
That's their
And
experiment.
if there's anything in this
Do
episode I
you
go
have
back
any
and do,
embarrassing
I would
stories
probably
about
try to
Gordon?
emphasize like
James,
what Henry's
I
doing in the
think
back
that's
in the
the
scene
best
because he's
guy
just kind of
right there
seething.
with him.
And to really
Quite
explain why
different
Henry
expression.
eventually goes off on Gordon,
Well,
the idea here
actually,
is
I'd
that
like to take this
while
one.
Gordon's been
I'm
kind of
feeling
moping
a
and
bit better, and I could
not
use
really
the
being
afternoon stretch.
himself, other engines are
Be my
doing his
guest.
job, mainly James, and
Excellent.
Henry's been kind of stuck with everyone else's work. And here everyone's laughing and
Except this
joking with
one
Scotsman,
time
and
Gordon
no
was
one's paying any
annoyed.
attention to Henry, so that's why he's just kind of frustrated. And unfortunately, he takes out that frustration at the wrong
I
time.
must be early today. I must be early today. You're not early.
Again, we go back
Or
to that
late.
motif of
Just
Gordon
on
and his
time.
inability to be on
Simply
time with the
just
Express.
acceptable, I suppose.
Just couldn't
Brunch.
really.
I
This
must
time,
be
I think he was
faster
just
than that.
on time.
You're not.
He wasn't
Accept
anything
that.
early. He wasn't anything
Bother.
phenomenal.
Bother.
And this time, he's trying
I'm
too hard.
better
He's
than
not
that.
doing it for the right
You know
reasons.
and I
That's why
know.
he's
I'm
not
supposed to
excelling
be
at
the
his job. He's
fastest
not
and the
trying
best.
to pull the
Not to be
Express on time.
outmatched
He's
by
just
some
trying to
stupid.
impress this
I
diesel. He's
know,
not doing it for the
Gordon.
right reasons. And now
You're
we
going
start to
for
see
a rough
Scotsman
patch.
really starting to dig into
And you're
Gordon more.
trying
This
to
is where he
force
has that
yourself to do more
more
than you're
of that
capable of
idea that now
doing
they're
right
alone,
now.
they can have this
Things will
conversation
right itself
one-on-one,
soon.
just
Scotsman,
really
I'm
digging
up
to what makes
Wesley,
Gordon tick,
you're
what is
up
wrong with
Wesley.
him, how is he handling this.
Gordon, everything the
And
workshop said
Scotsman
about us, they said about
knows
other
it, but
engineers.
the thing
Don't
is,
think that
Scotsman's dealing
diesel
with a
just
lot of the
made up
same
the
stuff
fact
that
that they
Gordon's
are
dealing with. The
the
difference is
best.
Scotsman can
They
hide
were
it better, and
told the
he's a lot
same
more in
things
control of
we
his
were.
emotions, and he's a lot more honest with
We
himself.
are great, Gordon, but
That's
you
why
can't
here
deny that diesels
Scotsman
have some merit in their theory.
is,
I don't like it, but I'm not
you
afraid
know,
to admit my own
he's trying to be
shortcomings.
the stronger one
There's
because
a
clearly
reason
he
why we
realizes
use
he has
torch
to.
trains, not
I'm sure that
main
Scotsman went
expresses.
through a similar arc
You're
that
the
Gordon did,
railway,
but I always kind of
proper
considered
or
Scotsman
improper
more
as it may
mature than
be,
Gordon.
has other feelings. We were meant for so much, Scotsman. And we are, Gordon. And
Just want
so
to keep
are
saying again,
others.
thanks for all the
I
congratulations and all that stuff.
suppose.
We'll
Hey,
soon
you
get to
lads are in
the
tonight. Duck and Henry are showing something off. Well, we'll be
soon
here.
get to the talk about other things, and I'll soon do my 9 years video.
What's going
Interesting
on?
question
You
from
had
Braden C.
better
While I
be
do a Scots
important.
video about
Hold your
Scotsman of
leash.
America, check out
Here
my
be
most recent
puns.
episode, The
More
Flying
lady,
Submarine,
let's
that'll
see
answer
those
that question.
hottest tenders. Henry the Green
So here we set
Engine.
up Henry's arc a little bit more. And you guys can see in this scene the reason why I kind of redid Tidwood Station distribution. I was tired of the roof sagging. I didn't like the color. Everything just looked off to me. But like, obviously now it's better. I thought it was funny to have like all the tenders be Henrys, but then I didn't have enough Henry tenders to have 6. So then I realized, oh, I could just use Big City Engine Center and just make a reference to the TV series, the idea that we're going to use Henry's model to be Big City Engine.
Well, There were these old
All right, so
tenders
now we get
lying
to the
around
big blow up
in the
scene
back of
at
the yard,
Tidmouth,
and
and
the
this
bank
scene was
controller
a
asked me
scene
to
that I was
take it
nervous
away.
about
I was talking to
writing,
Donald
but
about
I
the
wasn't
job, and
sure
Henry
if
pops
I
up
would.
complaining he doesn't have enough
Um,
tenders. And I
I
sold
didn't
my
wasn't sure if
opportunity.
people would
It'll take a clever
respond to
engine
it
to
well if
pull one
Gordon
of
and
the
Henry
dirt
would go
I've
too
got.
far. But I
I knew
wanted it
they
to be a
couldn't.
strong enough
I'd
conversation that it
love to
definitely
see you
had
take me
impact.
on, Donald.
And the one thing
Here
about
are
this episode
Douglas.
is that
Henry is
this
simply
doesn't get resolved
ridiculous and thinks
immediately in this
more
episode. This gets
offended than
resolved
good
later on in
Lord,
Little
Gordon.
Western. I'm not
What
going to
a
go through all 4
simpleton.
episodes now because
He's
that'd take
been
too long.
moaning
But
enough lately. Serves him right.
yeah.
Settle down,
So now
Gordon.
we finally have these
You
guys
really thought
here
Doug just
talking,
had 6
communicating, and here
tenders
comes
lying around?
Henry. And
What
this
a
is
fool.
where,
Oh, shut up,
let's
Gordon.
just say stuff gets real. I
Only
could
one
swear, but I
tender
didn't
now,
feel like it.
Henry. Come back to Earth,
Little
Henry.
Arcade
Oh,
Productions,
sir,
welcome.
shut
Welcome
up,
all the
Gordon.
people just joining. This is my 9-year stream. We're looking at one of my favorite projects I've done,
Temper,
The
temper,
Greatness
Henry.
Within.
We
It's the
wouldn't want you
30th
to get
episode of
even
my
more
series, and I'm
worked
just
up.
kind of
I
talking
have
through a lot
worked
of
up,
the stuff.
Gordon.
So
I
now
have been
Gordon and Henry
working
are having that
so hard for the
argument
past
where
week. While
Henry's
you've been
finally
moping
fed up.
about here, groaning
Gordon's
like your
making fun
brothers,
of Henry, and
I've been
he's taking a
picking up
couple extra
slack.
digs, and
Sure, James
finally
took the
Henry's like,
express,
you know what,
but
I have
ridiculous
enough.
one.
And this is
Me, and I
Henry's
do
enough is
my
enough
work,
speech,
and
and that's why
apparently
he's
Duck's
digging
work
into
too
Gordon.
now.
And
So I'm
everyone
not
else
allowed
is
to
like,
mourn? Then
you
again,
need to
you
relax,
wouldn't
Henry.
care if it was boiling. Then
Who's my
again,
favorite
you know
character
a lot
apart,
about it, being so
obviously
sickly
apart
and
from
weak.
James?
I may have
My
been
next
sickly,
favorite character,
but
or I
at
really
least
should say
I was
characters,
able
are
to
Donald and
outlast
Douglas.
certain other engines.
Comes down to
What are you
versatility for them.
saying, Henry?
I like the
Now,
way they
Gordon, these
interact with other
so-called
characters, the way they can be fit into other
professors
scenes.
are apparently at their best
and,
when they're
and it's
sitting
just,
around the yard looking fancy.
I love their
Good
personalities.
riddance,
Obviously,
all.
I acknowledge
Now
that they are
see
different,
here,
but I think
Henry.
I don't
You
have
are
a
a
preference
failed
between the
engine
two, which one I
because
like
someone
more.
tried to mess
I've always
with
considered
Grace's
Donald to be
perfect
the more,
designs. You are a hodgepodge
not really
of
abrasive, more
abomination,
outgoing, and
and
Douglas the more
thankfully there was
introverted.
only one
But
of you.
Douglas is the
I
more,
have a family to look back on.
willing to,
You're
more
just a
impulsive, I
lonely
should
old
say.
freak.
While Donald's more
Gordon,
calculated.
you're 6. Well, if I'm not wanted, I'll be
So
going.
obviously,
Good riddance to
now
a
here's where
family.
Gordon says those lines to Henry, and if you
You're
guys
a
know the
dastard
series,
of that engine.
and you know where that leads to, it affects Henry, and we see that in the next episode. And this was something I was really excited to do with this episode, is kind of mixing the stories of enterprising engines together, and I really wanted them to flow into one another, and I literally do that in a way that when I
Bother that
originally
engine.
premiered this
Bother
episode, I
them.
wanted to catch
What
people off guard, and it
now,
happened.
Gordon?
And it
2
happened
minutes.
subtly,
I
because
was
we've
2
reached the end
minutes
of Tenders
behind
for
schedule,
Henry, but that
and
story's
that
not
ruddy
over. And the
thing
reason
laid into
why
me says I'm
Gordon's
too
issues are still
blind to see what's
persisting is
coming
the
next.
way Audrey
Stupid
kind
diesel
of
doesn't know
sets
how
it
to
up.
speak to
It's,
an engine like me. With
oh,
some respect.
Scotsman showed up.
Perhaps,
Now Gordon's
Gordon, but
okay. Well, he still has to
perhaps
deal with the
that's where
fact that his
Henry
family's
takes his
gone. And I
wrong.
just want to know,
Gordon,
I just
stop.
always wanted
You
to
were
kind of
just
figure
as
out,
much in the wrong as he
how
was.
did Gordon proceed
Rubbish.
after that? Because
He
Audrey never really
insulted our
answered that
brothers and
question. So
sisters,
this was my answer to
and
that
you
question
insulted him
this
just
episode,
as
and really
horribly.
how
Calling a
Scotsman
freak and
coming
a
helped Gordon.
hodgepodge
So now
abomination,
these two are
while
having
you
another
took his
conversation.
side.
Gordon's still,
I'm
you
not
know,
taking sides.
not fully
You have both been
performing
acting
his
right.
express duties. Now he's dealing with the guilt
Hurting
of
him,
what
Donald.
happened to
Let
Henry.
me tell
And if you
you.
listen into the background,
Bring it on.
now you can
Yeah,
hear the
that's
conversation
We're relaxed.
and between James Duck, and the Diesels, and it just slides right in.
Now shut up.
Just get right
Come
into
on,
the
these
thick of it, and
ruffians.
suddenly we're in Super
That
Rescue.
controller brought them.
And
He says
the same
we
sequence
help.
is played in
Oh,
Super
not
Rescue
from them, I'll tell you that. Not
when these
again.
characters come together
Why is it
again
whenever a
and they have
diesel
that
arrives at these
conversation.
sheds, there's always an uproar? Because the
So,
filthy
but then we
things
see
have
the
no
opposite
manners
side of this
and
scene,
never
and that's
will.
what I really wanted to
All
do
right,
was
you two,
overlap
if
these
you're gonna
episodes
cause
in such a
trouble,
way
you're gonna have to leave. The shed's in the yard by the station. You can go there.
to now
Good riddance.
these
Come on,
characters,
711.
like now all these interconnecting plots
These will be our
are
sheds soon anyway.
coming together.
You
And I think that's one of the
insolent.
things I try to
Let
do in my
them
series
go,
is that
Golden. It's not worth it.
every character's got a story. It's
Come
just
on,
whether or
Gordon,
not I
got to get
focus
going.
on it. And you hear things referenced all the time in the background.
Little late for
Sometimes
this
those things
class.
are important for other episodes. Sometimes those things
That
aren't
controller
important. They're
is
just little
testing out
tidbits
the
of
new
the
diesels
characters are
today.
dealing
Want
with.
to put them on
Like
hard task.
Henry's dealing with his thing right now,
199 is taking the fast
and
roads that Henry usually
Gordon
takes.
is the focus. But we're not seeing James taking the express or what Scotsman's doing when Gordon's not around, because that's not as important. And obviously,
You
this scene we see the
filthy
opposite
scoundrel.
side of it
You
in
lot
Super
think you
Rescue.
a
you,
charge of
where Baron
outwitting the
Scotsman have a
flames. But
conversation
it's not
together,
that
and what
easy.
that
You
pertails.
think that you can
Obviously, he's
show
not
up
there
and
yet, but
insult my
we all
friends
know
in
he's going there.
distress There,
Gordon comes in here
you
and
monster
it has
shouldn't think to
completely
trap
different
my family
context.
and
And
do nothing.
here it's like
You
Gordon is
dare to defy me and take
kind of
my
just
job,
getting his
my
emotions out and he's
role on
taking
the
it out
island,
on Bear.
and then cast me
And
aside like it's
here it's
nothing.
almost in a
I'm
weird
not
way
going down
needed,
that
but
easy.
it's
Not
still
without a
wrong because
fight.
he's taking
So
it
if
out
you
on Bear for
heathens
no
think
reason.
you can take me
But
down too, you're
in
dead
Super
wrong.
Rescue, it feels
I'm
worse because of the
Wesley,
way it's
and we
set
possess
up.
more ability
But
within us than you tin kettles will ever know. We
here we have
Wrestlers
Bear
will
and
come to
Gordon
lines
Scotsman
and approve
talking.
them.
And
We
Gordon is
showed
just
up
getting out all
disgraces
these
like
negative
you, so
emotions.
bugger
And I
off
made some
this
changes
island
from
and
the original
leave us
Super
engines
Rescue. Bear was
alone.
pulling the
And
Limited, which would be
remember,
like a local
one day
service
you'll be
in that
useless
story.
and
I
stuck
wanted
in a
it to be more
scrapyard,
personal and just
and
make it
there's
seem like
nothing
Bear's
you
taking
can do.
Gordon's job.
Gordon,
Because I thought that would be perfect,
that
especially in a time like this where
is
Gordon's
enough.
emotional, and that the Express being his breaking point.
Gordon, listen to me. Here and now.
The Express is
Remember what I
his
said
breaking
about being
point,
a Presley? It's
and
just
now
a bloody name.
Scotsman
Sure,
is
some of
like,
the
all right,
fastest
Gordon,
engines
that's
in the
enough.
world
Like
have
now,
that
this
name
is the point
behind
where
them.
like you
But
need
we
help and you
aren't
need
the
to be
best
honest with
anymore.
yourself.
We're not the
And
most
the
efficient.
fact that it's not his
So
brothers and his
support them
sisters
now.
going away and all the other stuff that
I
happens. It's not his
support
falling out with
what's
Henry. It's the
right.
fact that now he's
And
losing
I
his job.
can't support you
And that's the
anymore.
kind of thing
Not
that
you
Scotsman
acting out
reminds
like
Gordon
this,
of, that this is your
insulting
livelihood.
and
That's why you
slandering
care
your
so much
friends
about
and
it. It's
shouting
not
at
about
visitors.
the
That's
most
not
important
my
thing in your
brother.
life.
Well,
You know,
you'd
you
to
have a
wash food,
purpose.
too if your world came crumbling around you.
And your
You don't
purpose
have
is the
your
thing that you
favorite
care the
job
most
taken
about.
away
Like
from you,
family and friends will
constantly
come and go,
insulted
and that's
for
sad and it's
performing at your
hard to deal
best.
with.
You didn't
But
have
you
your
have
friends
something
laughing
that
at
the
you when you
others
said
don't
you
have,
weren't
and that's the
happy.
ability to
You
have
didn't
this
have the
job,
experience I
and you
had
need to
going home
appreciate
nearly
it.
being
And this
swept
not only
between,
sets up
only
Gordon's
to fail
plot
later to
for
catch
this
him on a
episode,
later
but it sets
day.
up the flying
I'm not
surgery in it, and
happy,
it sets up
Scotsman.
future episodes of the series as well as other
I'm
stories that happen in the Rally series.
Gordon. It's
So
okay.
this is where Gordon
No,
really
it's not
understands
okay. How can you be so
who he
calm
is.
about this?
He's
We
not just
lost
a
your
wrestler.
family
He's
and you're
not just,
just able
you
to
know,
smile for the cameras. Do
sibling
you
of a
feel
famous class
nothing?
of engine. He is the Island of
Gordon,
Sodor's express
I
engine, and
feel
that's
just
what's
the
most
same
important
way
to him,
you do.
and he has to
But
handle
at the
that.
end of the day,
You
I
know, his
need to be
family had
strong
good careers
because that's
and
what
good
they want
lives,
us to be. I
but
feel
at
that
the end of the
way.
day, the life of an
Because you
engine,
know
you
it,
know,
that I
you should
miss
be
it while the
happy that
rest
you
of you
have
sit
it
off. It's
rather
not
than
that
worrying
happy,
about those who've lost
but
it.
I
And that's
know
kind of the idea
everyone
that
is supposed
Scotsman
to be
gets through.
happy,
And that's one of the
enjoy
things that
whatever
Scotsman says to
time we
Gordon, that
have
he's
left.
lucky that he has this
Presley
opportunity.
or not,
Scotsman is
fellow
basically a
Girl
tourist
Scouts.
engine at this point in his
I don't
career.
know.
That's the only reason
What
why
will
he's
I
saved.
have
He's
to
not
do?
saved for
You needed to
purposes of
avoid
hard work. He's saved for
I'll be
tourist
seeing you
trains and
later.
museum
Stay
stuff. He's
strong.
not really a working engine the same way Gordon is. And that's what Gordon now has to deal with. And this is my favorite
So,
scene of
pack
the
up,
entire
Gordon. It's a
series.
beautiful day. And
It's
so,
Gordon
driver,
fully at
lost
his
my job.
lowest. He's
I'll
demoted.
give him some of my
He's
friends.
pulling a local
There's
train. He
no
feels
hope.
like he's isolated and
More
lost from
diesels are
everybody. And the
coming.
score here from
There's nothing we
Upside
steam
Down, when I
engines
first
can
heard
do.
this theme, I was like,
That
this theme has
diesel
to be in
was
this
right.
episode. It fits the scene too
Steam has
perfectly.
been abolished.
And this was
Rubbish,
the
Gordon.
moment that when I
Steam engines have a
created
lot left
Sodor
in
New
them.
Era, this is what I
Not
wanted to
like
build
you.
back to. Was this scene right here, making sure this scene has the impact it has. And based on how people responded to it, I thought it did. And
We've got them,
I've
Gordon.
always
We've got them. What
loved
the?
this moment. Henry's lines here always get
Not a
me.
boy,
In
Henry.
Gordon's
Show
voice,
them what you can do.
the way it cracks, and it's just kind of like this almost
I
childish
can't wait
excitement.
to hear the story behind this one.
It
So
really,
much for the end of the
really
scene,
makes it,
Gordon.
really makes the scene. So obviously we get this moment where Scotsman arrives with the Express because we know what happens. With Super
Scotsman,
Rescue.
what are you doing with the Express?
I'll answer some of these
Oh,
other
story,
questions
but
at the
these
end.
diesels broke down.
I just want to stay relevant to the topic. So obviously we're seeing the end of Super Rescue and how it affects Gordon. So that moment of Gordon seeing Henry triumph over these engines after he just brutally insulted him, and it really makes him understand his worth, and Henry really shows that he still has a place in this world and he needs to take advantage of it. And this ending montage is Gordon taking advantage of it. This whole sequence is just, it's Gordon's triumphant moment. He understands what his place is in the world. But yeah, this part always makes me a little emotional. Not to sound like
Express
egotistical
hunting
or anything, but it's like this was
rules.
being able to see this scene actually on YouTube. It's made, and the fact that it's over 2 years old shocks me. But like, it's almost 3 years old at this point. But I look back at it and it just feels surreal seeing it after thinking about it for years on end and finally being able to put it to screen. Um, but yeah, that's the end of this episode, more or less. That's why it's my favorite. It's probably my favorite project I've done, my favorite story. There's a lot of other projects. I really liked how Flying Submarine came out outside of like some other things, like with the audio, which for whatever reason I had audio problems the last few months, but I think I fixed it. But anyway,
All right, we should be safe
let's address
inside.
some of the
Shush!
questions. So obviously,
There's
this
a
is the
diesel
ending
coming.
of the episode.
I'm being moved to a bloody steam railway. How
The
ridiculous!
idea that
Can't
we're
believe
going a
I have
few
to put
days
up with this
earlier. It's Bear
toxic
and D199 on
cruising
the
over
way to
abandoned
Sodor, and they see
engines.
Oliver.
And
And
to
that
think
sets
some
up a
little
little bit
creep
more
would
of
run
the
away and abandon scrap.
Enterprising Engine saga of
Shush!
episodes that I
Fat
did, just
chance.
teasing
Like he could take
some of the
on the
stuff that
whole
I had
Eloise.
and
He'll be
whatnot,
done
and
in.
integrating it
I'll
all
bet my
together.
best
But yeah,
barrel of
this was
oil.
just a fun
He'll be
little ending.
scrapped
That's
just
why I
for
like doing
me.
post-credit scenes. A lot
I'd
of them
do it
just set up
myself, but they
future
got some new
episodes and
guy
whatnot.
around.
But
I think they call him 10.
yeah,
Yeah, they'll rip him to shreds. Once he
and I
gets
like
his
that
claw on him.
Bear and Oliver do
Hi,
see each other,
what are you looking
and
at? Nothing.
Bear. It shows what kind of character
Just
Bear
a
is in this
signal
moment.
there,
Like Bear
stranger.
could rat Oliver out,
Oh,
and he's probably a
so I
dead
have.
man.
Come on, you.
But because D199's like blabbering on about like steam engine superiority and whatnot, um, he's not even paying attention. All right. So that's the end of Greatness Within. That's just my thoughts on it. That's what really went into it. So I'm going to answer some of these questions and respond to some of these comments. Um, let's see. What are your thoughts on Thomas as a character in the Railway series and the Classic series? Personally, I always liked Mean Thomas. I like when he's snappy. I think I've always liked about the Thomas characters that they're not perfect people. That they're very human in a way where they're not necessarily like even the nicest characters aren't always that nice. Like Edward is almost insanely nice, but everybody else is kind of like they got an edge to them to some way or one way or another. Like even Toby, like one of my favorite Toby moments, especially in the Railway series, is Mavis, where he's in Farquhar Yard, seeing Mavis struggle and refuses to help just out of the pure pettiness that he doesn't like her and he's mad what she did. But these characters, I've always liked the idea that they're snappy, but they have heart, and I think that makes them very human. A lot of children's-oriented characters, family-oriented characters, usually are trying to be overly positive or overly nice, and sometimes that gets to the point where they feel almost fake. And that's kind of some of the problems I had with like Big World, Big Adventures, and All Engines Go Onwards. They feel less like people and they feel more like archetypes. Let's see. Braden C. What was the hardest scene to film? In Sodor New Era as a whole, it was filming some of the stuff for Boulder Dash in season 4, my Boulder episode, because getting that boulder to roll consistently without going too fast and moving through the entire shot is annoying. But in that episode, The Greatness Within, um, there wasn't really a lot of difficult scenes because it's a lot of static moments of characters talking and a lot of heavy dialogue. But I would say, um, I would probably say the big climactic reveal, just because it was hard getting the whole super rescue train around that corner without like someone derailing or something, or couplings breaking and whatnot, or magnets splitting, I should say. Uh, thank you very much, Duke, for your comments. All right. I guess some of you guys are listing some of your favorite episodes of the series. So I kind of would like to hear that. What are some of your favorite episodes of Sodor New Era if you've seen that? Or if you guys have like particular memories with my channel. Um let's see. If you guys have like particular episodes you guys are fans of or memories or other videos you guys really like, sharing them in the comments. I definitely give my thoughts on that. Um Here's a question. What's my favorite Spider-Man movie and why? Um I mean, this is just probably recency bias that has me saying this. Um, I guess I'd have to say No Way Home for very obvious reasons. Um, I think I don't know. I just like the way that it not only kind of ended the MCU Spider-Man trilogy, but it also, in a way, gave some solidarity and a solid ending to other characters without going too much into spoilers for that movie. But it's been out for a year, so most people have seen it. But yeah, let's see. What are some episodes? Escape. Escape is one I like. That was a more experimental episode by me. Little Western's another one I really liked. That one was a fun episode. Ended up liking that. That one came out a little bit more than some of the other ones I did. I honestly like it more than Escape and Super Rescue because I had to do so much with Little Western. If you look at Little Western in the Railway series, it's it's a it's a very short story that really isn't a story. It's like 3 pages of, oh, Scotsman leaves. Oh, the Fat Controller finds out about Oliver. Oh, Duck and Oliver get a branch line and Bear gets a name. It's not really a story, it's just a sequence of events to wrap up the book. So I kind of said, okay, I set up all these plot lines from the first 3 episodes. How do I wrap it up here? And you get this. Somehow I took 3 pages and made a 30-minute episode out of it. So that's why I really liked. Some of my favorites are Stepney the Great, Trust, Flying Surgery, and Learning to Fail Successfully, All Together, Sleeping Beauty, and Band. Those are all good ones. I think a lot of those would be my favorites from the season. Stepney the Great. I was rewatching it the other day because sometimes I rewatch older episodes to make sure I am like carrying ideas on well and they hold up nicely. And just trying to see. I've been rewatching ones from season 2 and they've definitely held up. And Stepney's an underrated episode in my opinion. Just like in my opinion, in terms of how I rank them, I think I thought it was better. I like it more now than I did before. Not that I didn't like it before, but I thought it was really nice. The mainline engines installments, those were a fun group of episodes to write. And for those of you who don't know, Mainline Engines is actually my favorite Rally series book, not Enterprising Engines. And I kind of tried to emulate that book in the same way of stitching the 3 episodes together as one leads into the other, leads into the other. Just looking at some of the other ones, Trust was a fun experimental episode, Flying Surgery and Learning to Fail Successfully. That one's coming up a little bit. That's an interesting episode that people liked. I definitely thought that was a fun one to pair Arthur and Derek together. Let's see the new comments. Well, certain characters from CGI or hit era that you won't add to your series, like the Locking Locos. There are some characters I won't, not because I don't necessarily want to, but because it's hard to add everybody and give them valuable time. Like some people brought up the electric engines, and I want to do more with them, but I don't have a ton of ideas. But part of the problem also is just getting everybody screen time because there's so many different episodes I want to write at a specific time, and I need to give characters different screen time. Like in season 4, if you've noticed, it's been a lot of the excuse me, it's been a lot of the background characters, secondary characters, and tertiary characters getting lead roles. Where you have the Scarlowi Rally engines, particularly Rusty, and then you have Boko and Derek and Bill and Ben, and then you get Salty, and then you get Arthur and Derek, and obviously you get Gordon and Emily. But then the next few episodes, you're going to start seeing, not a lot of characters are getting speaking roles. Like I'm not even sure if Thomas has appeared on screen in the episode yet. Maybe in the background, but so that's one of my goals of season 4 is just trying to get some of the background characters more involved. But there are characters that just won't make it simply because I just don't have the abilities to. Favorite episodes from each of your seasons: Triple Play, Trust, Escape, and The Flying Surgery. Triple Play is one I definitely want to take another crack at and really making it better when I do remaster season 1. Sleeping Beauty. Sleeping Beauty's coming up a lot. That one was a fun episode to make. That was a fun episode to get into because, originally it was going to be 2 episodes. I'll just let you guys in a little behind the scenes secret. Originally, what I was going to do was the second episode of season 3 was going to be called His Grace, and it was going to basically be Sir Handel telling the story of essentially Grandpa, well, kind of Grandpuff, but mostly Bulldog and You Can't Win, and that's where we finally get the reveal of Duke. But then that would just be kind of seated in the background of season 3. But I decided to wait on that, and part of the reason why I just decided to wait, one, I had other ideas I wanted to do for season 3, and two, I thought it may have been better to kind of wait a little bit to bring Duke up. But also, because if you read Duke's book, there's a point where after they mention, I think it's at the beginning of Bulldog, after Scarlowe Reneus's 100th birthday, Sir Handel and Peter Sam wouldn't stop talking about the real Duke not showing up. And finally, that's what Sleeping Beauty is. It's these episodes built together. And I always like the idea of doing like a movie where it's like, you have this group of characters going on this trip, which are set up by the season because, we introduced the Reverend and Teddy Boston, we introduced the small railway engines, and not a lot of people really work all three of those elements into their personal retellings of the story. So it was nice to finally do that. Really like Sleeping Beauty. Wait, let me take care of this comment. My first video I watched from you was A Friend in Need, and I watched it when I was in the basement during a tornado watch when I was a little kid, and I got scared, but I got comfortable. I'm glad that video made you comfortable. That video was a very interesting video of mine, because for whatever reason, it blew up and went over 1 million views, and to this day, I really don't know how that happened, but it's still really nice to hear that it made you feel more comfortable. That was for a collab I did back in 2016. Favorite episodes: The Flying Sudrian and Trust. It was such an interesting experience to watch for the first time. I'm not gonna lie. It was a very experimental episode. The idea of the engines turning on the Fat Controller without really going on strike, something that was kind of hinted as like a no, you're not really supposed to talk back to him. And I kind of started getting the ideas from that when I was preparing Donald and Douglas's episode, with the whole deputation idea, because the idea is like, oh, we have to talk to the Fat Controller, and I always thought that was weird that like the engines are so bold to like suggest such a thing and like go against the Fat Controller's wishes, and I thought maybe that would be interesting. What happens if they truly did? Let's see. Just join. This is a Q&A stream. It is. It's just people. Right now are just sharing some of their favorite videos, favorite stories I've done, whatnot. Since you did Tit for Tat in season 3, how come you didn't try doing stories like Mike's Whistle and Useful Railway? Great question. And I think this comes back to a philosophy I have. I want to tell a lot of stories, but there's only so much time. I do about 15 episodes a season for right now. Hinty hint hint. But the idea is that each episode, I want to make sure that the ones I make are the ones that I can really add something to it. And I didn't really have anything to add to Mike's Whistle or Useful Railway. I'm sure I could think of something now, but I didn't think it was valuable enough, especially knowing I was doing like all 4 stories of Enterprising engines, and I was doing a bunch of stories from all of the Western engine, and I did a bunch of stories from mainline engines, and I was like, okay, I don't want to remake entire books. Sometimes I have episodes that go through the course of an entire book in one episode. Sometimes I'll like shorten up certain stories. And the reason for that being that I really want to make sure I focus on the things that I care the most about rather than just kind of going through the motions. And I definitely wanted to do Muddy Waters so I can better introduce the Arsdale characters, but also introduce the Reverend and Teddy Boston into the series a little bit. So that's why I picked that one out of the 3 and decided just to stick to that. Let's see. Favorite show besides Thomas? I don't watch a lot of TV nowadays. Everything's streaming. I watch a lot of Disney Plus stuff. So I'm really not watching any other show right now. There's shows that I like. It's up for debate. It could range from anything. I have to really think about that, honestly. Like, people always ask me, well, what's your favorite show? And I always answer, I don't really have a show that I watch. Just whatever's like streaming right now, whatever's interesting. So if I had to say right now, I guess I'd say Hell's Kitchen. That's a show I really like. I like cooking. I like Gordon Ramsay and all that stuff. So that's a show I've been watching recently. But yeah. Thoughts on Departing Now? Imagine how amazing it could have been if they made Spencer or Murdoch. I actually own a few Departing Now models. I have a Thomas and a James and Annie and Clarabelle and Seth pieces. But other than that, I don't have much of that. I really do like the brand. I wish it was sold better. I'm a huge fan of the Famous Eights videos. Love watching. I was just in his Christmas special. Um, uh, I'm blanking on the title right now. Alex is gonna get mad at me about this. What was it called? What was it called? What was it called? A Very Airy Christmas. That's it. I played Airy in that episode, and technically Bert, but Bert's a mute. Why did you make the Flying Sudrian a two-parter instead of one, like in Sleeping Beauty? That's a great question. Couple reasons. I wanted to premiere it originally, so I have not told this to people publicly, but I have mentioned it to some. My original plan for Flying Sudrian was to premiere it the same day as the Edison Train show. There was just one problem. One, I was not done in time to finish the entirety of it, and two, my computer crashed. I had to get a whole new computer. Something went wrong with the speaking system. I don't know um, what happened to it. My speakers just went dead, so I couldn't hear anything no matter what I did. My computer just like failed on me one day, and I had no chance, no way to edit videos. So I was like, all right. So I got a new computer. This was like a week after my birthday, so it made things easier to get. But so I finished about half the episode right before the show. So I was like, all right, I'll just upload half, and then upload the other half, and then upload the rest. And I think my philosophy for now on is if I have an episode that's longer than 30 minutes, I'll make it a two-parter, especially for like finals, and then just upload the full thing afterwards, because it's hard putting all those like it's hard like waiting for all the parts to come together and then upload it. I'm sure some people prefer having like all of it together, which is why I give the separate upload a little bit later. But if you guys really have a strong preference one way or the other, then maybe I'll just go back to doing the full upload. But I don't know. I just wanted to have half of it done. I wanted to have some part of it done, so I found a good middle point, a good place to start for Flying Sudrian, and that was a good spot. All right, I think I'll cap the stream at around 9:30. So if you guys have any other projects from of mine that I liked, any other questions? Oh, I missed a question here. Who is your favorite Scarlowi Rally character? This changes depending on my mood. Um, I've honestly come around. It's bounced between four. I used to say it's for Handel, then it was Duncan. For a minute, it's been Rusty, but honestly, I think now it's either Rheneas or Duke. All right, let's see. I have a bunch of questions here. Favorite TV series prop. um, my favorite TV series prop is obviously my my favorite character, James. His original prop, which I've seen in person a couple times. So a lot of fun stories attached to that one. Will Stepney come back into my series? I don't have a plan to right now because it's kind of hard to write Stepney off the Bluebell Railway. I might include him in something in the future, but we'll just have to wait to see. Yeah, Duke, I want to address this comment. How the idea that certain episodes and points of the series either have loose ends or not as cut and dry as a right and wrong. And yeah, I like that idea mainly because one, I want to build upon it, but also a lot of the themes in my series are this idea of like there's a lot of gray to this. Like, are steam engines always good? Are diesel engines always bad? Where do people fit this conversation? That's where all the characters fit in this diagram of what they believe in and who they are and whatnot. And it's this crazy dynamic that the idea that certain things I'm going to fully explain and tell you everything, and some things I'm just going to kind of leave you guys to figure out. And I like that. It leaves people can come up with their own theories. When a lot of people ask me questions, I like to try to answer as if I don't know the answer or I didn't, have the answer in mind. I like to think of it as a suggestive answer. Why do you think the idea of an episodic series is slowly being faded out of the fandom in favor of individual episodes? It's a difficult question to answer. I think the answer is, and I don't mean this in a mean way because I totally would get this, is creating an episodic series is very difficult because you have to kind of have a plan. And when you don't have a plan, it leads to things not always working. And you have to be able to quickly adapt. Like there are things that I did in season one or said in season one that I wouldn't say are not canon, but I would change what I meant by that. And you're constantly evolving in your head what you do and what you do and don't want to do in your series. Versus individual stories, it's easier just to kind of call them as like individual little things, and you don't have to think too much about like am I like going against what a previous episode did if I'm doing something else. Let's see. Just going to try to wrap up some of these comments before the end. Narrow gauge engines. Will these narrow gauge engines appear Bertram, Freddy, Money Mac, or Ivo Hugh? Some of them will, some of them won't. I won't say which ones will, and I won't say which ones won't. Let's see. Any chance we'll see Molly pop up again? I don't have a plan for it for her just yet, but we'll see what happens. What season 5 episode would you never adapt for a Sodor New Era? There's a few I would pick just because, as crazy as they are, they're a little too outlandish. I would probably say like Toby and the Flood is probably the most obvious one, just because figuring out where even that would take place and all that would be difficult. And frankly, I don't really want to get into the minutia of that. But it's that's one of those episodes that's really cool, but like I wouldn't want to mimic. Plus, just recreating it in general would just be a headache. All right, I think I'll take one more question. What story is the definitive Thomas the Tank Engine story? That's a very, very layered and deep question. I think the definitive story, and this is kind of a wild one to pick, is probably Sir Topham Hatt's engines from the Rally series. It's a very small story. It's like Thomas goofing off and he has an accident, but it's like that story's impact is the idea that like people don't believe the island of Sodor is real, so we're gonna make them believe it, and we're gonna show them. It's this culmination of a book that gets into why these characters are famous and their antics and whatnot and who they are. With Gordon going foreign and he goes to London and he's getting pictures and people are like, "Oh, it's Gordon. He's from the island of Sodor. It's one of the Fat Controller's engines. He's famous." And he's getting pictures for that. He's like, he's the guy from the Railway series. And you have like, Percy talking to engines the other railway. It's like the idea of really bringing the real world into Sodor for the first time, and I think that's the definitive story, I'd say. Thank you very much, Braden C. I already answered if I'm gonna remaster all of season 1. I do plan to. All right. I think this is a good place to end the stream. I thank you all for coming out on a Friday night, just kind of hanging out with me. Yeah, if there are any other things people want to say before we end the stream, this is the last chance. I'm just gonna wrap it up. Being on YouTube for 9 years has been great. Can't wait to release that 9 years video. It's gonna be fun. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of season 4 and what's to come afterwards. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed yourself. I hope this was a good stream. I hope it wasn't too boring or anything like that. But yeah, other than that, man, when we get to 10th, that's gonna be a fun year. Oh man, God, I feel old because when I joined YouTube, a lot of the people that I grew up watching were hitting their like 8th. Where they were hitting their 8th, 8 years, 9 years, some of them even 10 years. It just feels weird to like be in that position. All right, thank you guys so much for coming. This has been TrainKing James. I'll be logging off. Have a nice night, everybody. Be safe. All right. And we are out of here.